Hey everybody, Chris Bailey here with Physical Therapy and Balance Centers. And this, despite most people not knowing, is a model of the shoulder. We happen to have a wonderful woman who's behind the camera right now that thought this was a lung for the longest period of time. I didn't know that bones grew out of lungs very often, but apparently she thought this for the last 2 months. She's been working with us for the last year or so. But anyways, this is the shoulder, and where it goes is it sits about like this. All the red structures on here are the muscles of the shoulder, many of the muscles, the deep ones called the rotator cuff. And with the shoulder complex, this is where a lot of the issues happen, is that the rotator cuff or the muscles deep in the shoulder become injured. These muscles all sit on the shoulder blade in through this area. They come out and they grab a hold of our upper arm bone. What they help to do is to keep that arm bone stable as we go through different movements. Most of the time, if people have pinching that goes on up through this area because of poor posture, because of repeated movements, sometimes because of a fall, what can happen is it can pinch that muscle in between here, the rotator cuff, especially the top one called the supraspinatus is injured most of the time. It can tear that little muscle. And what we see is when it's torn, people have trouble lifting their arm like this. They have quite a bit of pain generally through this area. Sometimes they'll pin it in through here, although the muscles are up here that are torn. And they have pain putting pressure on this side. They usually have pain reaching back this way or back behind their back like this. And the trouble with this little bugger is when you tear this, it doesn't like to heal on its own. It has really poor blood flow. So that's why they have to oftentimes do surgery if there's a big tear. If you have just a little tear in through here, you might not have to do a whole lot. Therapy could be enough to restore your range of motion and get some strength in some other ways. The other thing that can happen is you can get arthritis. And basically, if I pop this little bugger out, you have this upper arm bone that's a ball and socket. And instead of being nice and smooth, it can be more roughened, kind of like a cheese grater. So you have two roughened surfaces, and the inside you have the socket rubbing on each other, and it can create some snapping and popping in the shoulder. And what can worsen that we see a lot of times is when you get tightness in through the back and the front of the ligaments on the shoulder, and it compresses that joint. So those are a couple problems. Another one is that we see a lot of times is in the biceps. So our biceps muscle starts down here in the forearm. It comes up this direction. It splits in two. One part goes deep into the shoulder, the other one here. And that can become torn or aggravated in the front. And there's some certain tests that we do to see if that bothers people, but generally you have pain right here in the front of the shoulder. And lastly, the most common thing that we see are issues with what's called the AC joint. And this is just the joint between the bone of the shoulder blade that sticks out called the acromion, A, and the C is the clavicle, and that's the bone right through here, the collarbone. So those meet up right at this area. And what happens right here, and this happened to me a few years ago, is you get little bone spurs that can form. So basically, little bones can come down and they can pinch on the muscle and rub. And when that happens, sometimes just to improve our posture can help through specific exercises. Sometimes to do some stretches that loosen up the back of the shoulder to bring that in a better position can open it up, and that can help. And otherwise too, sometimes some strengthening so that that upper arm bone sits in a better position can help. So some of the treatments that we do besides just exercise, sometimes you need some manual therapy to loosen up this back part of the shoulder, which involves us getting some really specific movements in there to loosen this up so there's more room for that bone to move naturally. We see quite a few people that have what's called a frozen shoulder, and that's where it tightens up when you get up into certain ranges. It's really hard to loosen that up on your own, and sometimes that just might need some manual treatment to get that limbered up so that you can get to the exercises that we show at our Active at Home series. So if you have some discomfort in the shoulder, some stiffness in the shoulder, and just some mild pain, I'd recommend trying out the Active at Home series for the exercises for the shoulder. Try that out for a good 2 or 3 weeks. If you still have some trouble with that and you have pain that's staying in the shoulder or stiffness, give us a call. We'd love to work on the shoulder. It's a really complex little bugger, but sometimes we can find some pretty simple solutions to your problems. So check that out, our video. Any questions, give us a call. Concerns, you could email us as well, cbailey@physical.com. Thank you.